From San Antonio, Texas, this is the Manly Training Podcast, a podcast about how to do life God's way. Each week, we deliver a meaningful message that will encourage you and give you a biblical blueprint to live life the way God designed it to be. Whether it's parenting, marriage, relationships, or how to overcome life's curveballs, the Manly Training Podcast will bring a biblical perspective to each week's theme. My name is Eduardo Quintana. I am your host, and I must say this very humbly. I am not an expert. The information I bring to you each week is from God's Word and from personal experience. This week, we take a hard look at parenting as we continue to discuss the 7 worst things parents do. In today's episode, we will discuss why it's not good to expect your children to fulfill your dreams. Proverbs 20:29 says, "The glory of the young is their strength. The gray hair of experience is the splendor of the old." Do you get what Solomon is saying here? There are advantages of being young that you don't have as much as when you're old, and vice versa. We don't need to envy another age group because whatever age we are has unique advantages. Older folks have more experience and hence more wisdom than the young. Therefore, parents should let their children fulfill their own dreams, or better yet, fulfill what God has laid out for their lives, instead of trying to live their lives through their children. I see it all the time, parents trying to live their life vicariously through the lives of their children. One of the semifinalists of American Idol in 2008, David Archuleta, has a father who was banned from backstage by the producers of the show. Apparently, he was too involved in his son's competition. You see, he changed the lyrics to one of the songs that his son was to sing and added the lyrics of another song for one verse, leading the show to have to pay royalties for a second song that they hadn't planned on. Now, I'm sure the show has the money, but the incident represented a lot of other stuff that had been happening with this over-involved dad. I don't pretend to know this father's motivations, but to me, he seems to represent a trend in our culture. Parents who get into verbal and physical fights with umpires at little league games. Moms who push little girls into beauty contests so that they can receive praise through their kids. Or dads like Archuletas who go overboard to perhaps get recognition from themselves. Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the subscribe button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. And now back to the show. Parents, children are not our property. They belong to God. We are only stewards to bring them up in God's truth. We need to pray for them and train them to follow God's paths for their lives, not our plan for their lives. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it." This verse is frequently misused. Many well-intentioned pastors and preachers teach that it means to show them God's way so that when they grow up, they won't depart from it. But nothing is further from the truth. How many times have we seen pastors' children who were raised in God's Word go astray, leave? Yeah, some of them, most of them, probably come back at some point after a year or 2 or 10 or 20. But this is not what this verse is talking about. This verse has nothing to do with that. You see, to train up a child in the way that he should go is compared to the way a tree branch grows. They have a natural bent. Our job as parents is to find the natural way that our children are bent and to train them to follow it, because that is God's design for their lives. We could read it like this: train up a child in his natural bent that God created for him, and when he is old, he won't depart from it. Now that makes a little more sense. Are they mellow and artistic, or are they full of energy and curiosity? You see, not every child is the same. That reminds me, don't compare your child to the neighbor's child. I hear it all the time. "Oh, that child over there is so easygoing. Oh, my child is a whirlwind." Or, Their child can sit quietly, and while mine can't. You may not see it, but the other parent is probably saying things like, "Why can't my child ride his bike without training wheels? The neighbor's kid just took them off, and he learned to do it in 5 minutes." Or, "I wish my child was more of a go-getter like their child is. He just sits there." The grass always seems greener on the other side, doesn't it? But really, moms and dads, don't push your children to do those things that you want them to do. Perhaps you didn't achieve every success that you wanted as a child. Don't make the mistake of trying to push your child to do what you didn't get to do. That kind of pushiness just breeds resentment and rebellion. Parents, get a life. Get a life outside your child's life. Build adult friendships and enjoy activities with people your age, in addition to doing things with your children. Act your age. You'll be happier, and your kids will be better adjusted. Don't miss next week's episode when we bring up the 7th item in my list of 7 worst things parents do. And that is when parents neglect their spiritual lives. That is probably the single worst thing that you can do. Thank you so much for joining us this week on the Manly Training Podcast. Make sure to visit our website at manlytraining.com, where you can subscribe to the podcast so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in this podcast, we'd appreciate a rating, or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, that would help us out too. If you liked this podcast, you might want to check out our YouTube channel, The Manly Training Show. It's a fun and dynamic way to approach God's Word. At Manly Training, we do it God's way. Until next week.